And here we go. Boom. We are alive, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today. Our never-ending search to learn more about what's going on in technology. We stumbled across the Akash Network, and today we have the CEO and founder, Greg Osuri. Greg, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Gio. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, it's a pleasure. You know, you've got such a great background. Maybe we should start there. Actually, you want to tell us a little bit about your background and who you are?
Sure. My name is Greg Osuri. I'm the CEO and founder for Overclock Labs and the founder of Akash Network. Background being a programmer for a little over 25 years, and I would say last 13 years or so, I've been primarily focused on shipping and building developer tooling. Founded a company, Angel Hack, to take hackathons to masses. That's where I helped launch several companies, a notable one being Firebase. Firebase eventually got acquired by Google and became Google Cloud's most loved database. Angel Hack, by the time I left the company, we had about 150,000 developers in the ecosystem. And Angel Hack was really where I got incredible insight into understanding developers, especially during the moments of stress, right? Hackathons are these things that you ship and build within 3 days. And found passion to solving this common problem with developers, which was deploying infrastructure at scale in a frictionless way. So at that time, in 2013, the big problem happened to be, you can find scalable systems, but they're not easy to use, but easy to use systems that are not scalable. So wanted to focus on that and founded a company, Overclock Labs, to really solve this developer experience problem. Fell in love with this new technology stack called Linux containers that would, provide part of the solution to this amazing problem that I was working on, and really stumbled upon into this another community called Kubernetes very, very early in 2015. Made a few contributions, and really Overclock Labs was created to take Kubernetes to masses. And as we were deploying this solution to the masses in data centers, we found out that most compute used in these data centers was not used, north of 85% or so. That's when the idea for creating a marketplace for this unused compute came about, and that's the birth of Akash.
Oh, beautiful. What a great background. So Greg, I'm not a technical person. I actually ended up in the tech sector basically by accident. I was spent most of my life studying music and plants. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the cloud computing space and some of the problems that are generally found there today?
Yeah, to give you a background where we are and how we got to where we are. If you think about the internet, right, the really beginning of the internet, let's just say Web 1.0. In Web 1.0, if you wanted to have a website, you have to have a computer that with an open port and a reliable internet connection to have a website. Of course, more users use your website, you need to have bigger and faster computers. So, you no longer hosting the computer at home is no longer an option the more users you get. So you need to move that computer from your home and put it in another larger machine called data centers, right? So in the world of Web 1.0, we had this, the birth of data centers, we call it. And companies like Alta Vista, Amazon, trying to think Web 1.0 companies, I think Amazon is the most prominent one, maybe even Yahoo, all these companies started building these massive data centers to house these computers to serve their websites. And in somewhere down the line, they built too much of it, right? Much more than they can consume. And really, I think that's when the idea for the idea of offloading the compute, what they built, came around, and that birthed the cloud or the Web 2.0, right? And Web 2.0, the revolution was no longer the websites were accessible only from computers, but this birth of this mobile phone, mobile first came around, right? And the idea was a lot of these companies like Amazon that already deployed, data centers at scale have excess capacity that they can, further resell their capacity to in a market where if you are a developer, you no longer need to go build your own data center, but rather use one of these data centers, right? So that's the birth of the cloud, or Web 2.0, we call it. And of course, the Web 2.0 got very, very powerful. I think Web 2.0 really took internet to a level that is never been done in history, right? To the scale that we have now. Of course, Web 2.0 classic companies would be Ubers and a lot of the mobile, the Facebooks and the Twitters and this solo-mo revolution or social, local, and mobile revolution came about. And most of these companies were not having their own data centers. So obviously this created, it has its benefits. I mean, the benefits is you don't need to own a data center, but the pitfalls were these companies that are offering this cloud became very powerful, right? Very powerful because now if you think of, your cloud being the central fabric of our society, all our data sitting on the cloud, 4 companies essentially control 80% of the marketplace. And in the process, they became rent seekers, right? Because it's very, very, very expensive to build your own data center and run it, let alone doing it at profit, right? So unless you have this massive operation where renting a cloud is actually way more expensive than running your own compute, it's really not profitable to run your own compute, although running your own data center has its benefits of sovereignty and whatnot. So Web 2.0 created this structural problems through oligopolization, and we are left with 80% of market share control, and market share of what industry today is about $390 billion, and which is projected to be $1 trillion very soon. Majority of that is controlled by 4 companies, right? So now the Web3 revolution, what Web3 is trying to do is bring back the core principles Web1 was founded on, which is sovereignty and privacy and all the amazing things the internet was founded on, with the comfort of Web 2 in terms of ease of use, right? So Web 3 is really an evolution from Web 2, taking all the good things of Web 1 and removing and Web 2 also and removing all the bad things the Web 2 created. So that's really where we are from an evolutionary standpoint.
And I remember in 2017 when I kind of really started to broaden my perspective on research and looking at the tech sector almost as a whole. I remember at least back then, there seemed to be a big dilemma of serving data via the blockchain. Obviously, blockchains are slow. Have you incorporated Web3 and this cloud computing software to provide a product? And what are the benefits of that?
Right. So the notion of blockchain being slow, I think, is a little misguided, right? So misguided in the sense that, well, every system is only good as the load it serves, right? So the performance is directly related to the scale, right? How much you're serving. And in blockchains, we've also seen several generations. The generation 1 being proof of work, generation 2 being shared proof of stake, and I think generation 3 being sovereign proof of stake, right? So yes, proof of work, there was a lot of inefficiencies inherently built into the model, a lot of trade-offs. Basically, the inefficiency was a trade-off for security, right? Proof of stake came along and solved that security problem by putting the security, moving from a resource-intensive model to a participatory model where you have the token that secures the network, right? Ethereum being a classic second-generation blockchain, which offers a shared security model. So instead of instead of when you're launching a blockchain, instead of like securing the blockchain yourself, you can borrow security from a shared state. And the trade-off is, well, you also inherit the economic properties, right? So it's slower and it's expensive to put up to do transactions. We all know how expensive it is to use Ethereum to do basic things. So it's not very practical. So Akash Network is different because it's a proof of stake blockchain, but it's fully sovereign. That means all the things that happen on the Akash Network are pertaining to cloud hosting only. So we have our own sovereign economic regime where the gas fees are 1/4 of a cent, I believe, and the finality happens in 6 seconds with a pretty decent guarantee. So that gives you a much better user experience. And well, the trade-off, again, it's not as fast as running a database like a MySQL or a Redis database. But the trade-off you really are going after is permissionless and an open system, right? But the user experience, on the other hand, is not affected too much because we can design the interaction model to account for an asynchronous settlement mechanism, where even though with 6-second finality, you don't really feel like you have a 6-second finality, right? So yes, the notion in 2017 was blockchains are slow, but I think we evolved to a point where the experience is being adaptive with the finality in place. So if you use Uniswap or any of these blockchains, you kind of feel the experience, right? Like, and if you use something like Osmosis, which is a sovereign proof of stake, you can see the difference in speed. So that's where we're going.
And how is the Akash chain built in comparison with something like a Solana, an Avalanche, or an Ethereum? Again, I'm not a technical person. I can tell there's advantages to each of these and probably disadvantages as well. How is the Akash blockchain built in comparison?
Right. So you look at Solana or Near or any of layer ones, right? They are a shared state chain. That means if you are building a blockchain network, if you use Solana, you can get the security from Solana, and in exchange, you pay the gas fees to Solana, right? So that's the model. It's a shared state model. Whereas Akash we don't consider Akash to be a layer one, even though it's a sovereign blockchain, it's an independent blockchain, because it's really a dApp, right? It's a dApp that does cloud computing. So, but the model for Akash is sovereign. That means we don't share the Akash blockchain with any other blockchains. We're just an independent blockchain. So we don't have to inherit, or we don't have to pay someone else a gas fee. All the gas fee the users pay go to the Akash network, and the gas fee is determined by how busy the Akash network is, which is not as busy as a Solana or any other shared state blockchains. So the core difference between shared state and sovereign state is like, well, in a shared state, you can share the security, which is easy for you to launch a product on a shared state blockchain. So that's why you see tons of apps being built, dApps being built in Solana. Whereas a sovereign blockchain, you don't really share the security because you're running it by yourself, but the outcome is you can get a highly performant and super low cost model, right? So I think that's the difference between Cosmos based chains and a shared state based chain. So Akash being a Cosmos SDK based chain. Now the question is like, well, how do you interrupt, right? When you have a shared chain, you can interrupt easily. So two protocols built on Solana can talk to each other very, very easily. Same thing with Ethereum. Multiple dApps built on Ethereum, smart contracts can interact with each other easily. Whereas in Cosmos-based chains, their interaction is not that easy. It was not possible until about, I would say, like 4 months ago. Now, with the advent of interblockchain communication, or IBC, different Cosmos-based chains, which are independent chains, can talk to each other and get the benefits that you get with a chain like Solana or Ethereum. So, if that answers your question,
Yeah, that was great. So I remember the last time we had a little brief introductory conversation. that through Akash, you guys are actually able to produce much cheaper cloud computing costs. And that because of that, I guess the average entry for someone, let's say in the Philippines, building a website is more accessible. Can you tell us a little bit how that's accomplished and how that data is served to the web itself?
Yeah, so Akash is a marketplace for cloud computing, cloud grade computing, right? So essentially, the way it works is anyone with a computer, usually anyone with a data center and has computing power in a data center, can install Akash in their data center and instantly sell that compute when they're not using it, right? In a permissionless way. You don't have to talk to anyone. You don't need an approval for it from anyone. You can just install it, and that compute becomes part of a large network where tenants, developers building applications, can use that compute. And the process in which they request compute is called a reverse auction. In the sense, a developer will define what they want to deploy and set the price parameters as to how much they're willing to pay, and post that request on chain, and providers bid on the request, and usually the winning bid is usually the lowest bid wins, and a lease gets created between the tenant and the provider, and the deployments happen, right? So the important part of this model is that developers set the price versus the traditional model where providers set the price, right? So it's a developer first platform. The outcome of that is today Akash costs anywhere from half to 1/5 what you would pay on Amazon, which is not trivial, which is significant, right? So so we have several applications that leverage this amazing cost advantage that are contributing to the adoption of Akash Network. And the model is just because it's a free market model.
Well, everybody likes equal quality for a cheaper price. Can you tell me what this would look like from my standpoint? Let's say we want to host the Arcane Bear website in kind of, I guess, of a layman's term. What does it look like from the general, I call myself lame, the general layman's person, like I want to host my website on the Akash Network. What does that look like?
So it is still a, so the process would look something like, well, you have your application and you got to put that application into something called a Docker container, right? A container essentially packages all the different programs your application needs or your website needs to run into a contained unit that you can easily move around. And you need to host a Docker container in a registry and define your runtime parameters and the cost parameters using a language we created called SDL, or Stack Definition Language, we call it. It's a very simple language that allows you to really say where you want to put your application. Do you want to put it in California, if you have a lot of users in California, or New York, or across the globe, and how much you're willing to pay at these regions, right? And how it should run. And that's pretty much the work you need to do. Now, this containerization process is not something unique to Akash. It's a very general process. Most websites today, I think 80% of the websites, applications running on Amazon are containerized. So if your application can run on Amazon, it will run on Akash. And that's a very important feature, because you don't really need to change much to run on Akash. In fact, we go even one step further. Actually, we support something called Docker Compose, which is a very it's a very near and dear framework for a lot of developers. Usually, when you're developing something, an application locally, you develop it using Docker Compose. You can take your Docker Compose file with very little changes, deploy it directly on Akash. So we made it very easy for developers to deploy, and we got to a very early in their development workflow, right? So it's in some cases, in most cases, actually way simpler than deploying on Amazon.
And so let's take a look from the other side then. Let's say I've got some extra servers, which I don't have, or maybe we can use a MacBook or something. is the everyday person able to easily connect compute power to the network itself? And what does that process feel like?
It's a little technically involved from a provider standpoint because you need to be equipped with Linux, basic knowledge of Linux and Kubernetes in order to become a provider. And yes, you can put any machine on Akash Network as long as it has a public IP address. There's another requirement, right? So, but the challenge is Akash is an open marketplace, right? So developers request compute, and the competition amongst providers is basically mostly in data centers, right? So if you have a home computer, the chances of you competing with a data center grade provider is and winning is low, right? So yes, you can put your home computer, maybe offer a price point that's so low that it might be attractive to developers, but it's not the most profitable outcome, right? And because your home computer is not as powerful as a data center computer. And today, Akash Network has a lot more supply than demand, and that's why the prices are low, right? Demand higher than supply. Sorry, supply higher than demand. So so the chances of you actually earning money for a low power computer where there's ubiquitous supply is actually low, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So I guess my next question here is, one of the things I found fascinating about the blockchain sector is we seem to kind of stumble into new use cases of the technology as we go. Like, we're kind of redefining what it's good at. What are some of the exciting things that's happened out of this decentralized compute network that you didn't originally anticipate happening?
It's a very good question, actually. So I kind of had an idea of permissionless scale, but I didn't really understand what that entails to, especially permissionless composability, until I saw DeFi, right? So if you look at permissionless systems historically, they always had massive scalability signatures, right? Internet, if you look at the www, the World Wide Web, before World Wide Web, you had BBSs and whatnot, but then they were very closed off systems, right? So you had internet was there since the 60s, but it really didn't take off till the web came, right? And the reason for that was internet, even though the foundation was very open and decentralized, it was gated by closed protocols or closed systems like AOL, being a good example, right? The permission systems. The moment the browser came, the moment the www came, it just changed everything. It went permissionless from a permission system. So I was very young I remember the 2000s, but I was not in Silicon Valley back then. It was not in the thick of the action to really, live it until recently when I saw DeFi on Ethereum taking off, because what was originally closed off is now all of a sudden open, right? So from a finance standpoint, if you want to get access to any of the money markets on Wall Street, you need the API key, which is not the easiest thing to get. So for me, to build a financial applications that do not need a permission and still innovate in such a rapid experimentational mode was just mind-blowing, right? So I think I didn't really fully grasp the power of permissionless composability till I actually saw DeFi in action. And then and that changed everything. And now imagine applying that to either computing, to what we're doing with the Akash network, or storage, what's going on with Arweave and several other, or Saya coin, several other protocols. My imagination now is running wild, because now, all of a sudden this permissionless composability applied to different things are just going to be so crazy that we can't even comprehend what kind of application we're going to see. So I'm very excited for that.
Awesome. Yeah, me too. I've always been surprised. I guess that's like one of the fun things of learning in general, or the bewilderment of it all. One of my thoughts that came out too was also about risk or risk mitigation. Websites like the Silk Road, the how does the Akash network deal with data being computed that may go against specific bordered countries' restrictions or geographical laws? Is there a, does the permissionless system get rid of that risk, or do you feel that there is an inherent risk regardless of the system that's at play?
So the permissionless system doesn't really get rid of the risk, right? So it really comes, so the topic on censorship, right? So Akash network is censorship resistant. So what that means is no one can take down the workload as long as there's a provider willing to serve the workload, right? So it really comes down to, as long as there's somebody willing to let you in or willing to like host you, you're always going to run, right? So say you're doing something illegal. It depends on or something not illegal. Let's say like you're doing something that half the people
Political activism.
political
Yeah,
activation.
doesn't even
Okay,
have
let's
to be
take
illegal.
Parler.
Something someone doesn't like.
Yeah, let's take Parler for example. Parler is a website that got deplatformed by Amazon and by Cloudflare, by so many other platforms. They were not doing anything illegal. They were just serving to a half the country that disagrees. I mean that's divided, right? So they're serving a country that's divided. So half the people agree and half the people don't agree. Obviously, Amazon execs don't agree with Parler, so they deplatform. Whereas a Parler would run very efficiently in Akash because as long as there's half the country that's agreeing with them, right? But if you're doing something like child pornography, right? I don't think anybody's going to support that, right? And if there is somebody that's going to support that, well, their public address is visible and authorities should have and go and do what they're supposed to do, right? And nobody wants to host something bad as a child pornography thing. So it really comes down to community, right? Community in a permissionless system has a tendency to self-moderate, and Akash is no different. So it's all about self-moderation.
Were there any early communications with a company like Parler around offering them cloud compute and during their dilemma with AWS and Cloudflare, et cetera?
No, not really. It's a permissionless system, so we don't need to communicate with anybody. They can use Akash if they want to use Akash, right? There are certain websites running on Akash. We don't really have full visibility of what's running. As another thing about Akash is you can't really see what's running where, right? Unless you're a provider. I think providers have a way to know what you're running because you can see the logs and you can see what website is hitting your servers, right? But no, there was no particular conversation with Parler to answer your question.
Okay, I guess part of the next kind of step there is in the growth of Akash. How do you plan to expand those enterprise conversations? Because that was definitely like one of those highlight moments for Parler. They were starting to grow. They were starting to hit some type of network effect, and they were instantly cut off. Is there I guess there's two parts of the question. Is there a roadmap within the enterprise structure that you guys are working on to parlay those conversations? And I guess just in general, what's the roadmap for Akash look like over the next 1 to 5 years?
We just published a roadmap recently last week. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it. Our biggest, so we're going after the highest impactful applications. Right now, machine learning happens to be a humongous problem, and especially from a cost standpoint, right? Machine learning is so expensive that if you look at any of the filings, S1 filings from Web 2 companies like Snowflake or whatnot, there's a strong indication that 50% or so of margins actually go to pay Amazon bills, right? So it's just ridiculous. It's a lot of money, right? 50%. So even if you save them 10 to 20%, that's a huge benefit. These are public companies, right? So we're going to go after incredible use cases like this, where we can make a huge difference, right, from an enterprise standpoint. And so we're seeing quite a bit of adoption there, and we're seeing a lot of interest with machine learning. We're going to have machine learning in another 6 months, hopefully by, and we're working with several partners, to both from a customer standpoint as well as from a supply standpoint to really unlock machine learning. And it's not the easiest thing to do. I mean, working with a multi-tenancy GPU architecture is extremely hard. And so from a supply side, proof of Ethereum is coming off proof of work to proof of stake, right? And that's going to unleash a humongous amount of GPU systems that were primarily used for mining, right? So unlocking that supply onto Akash and having machine learning run on these GPU instances at 20% lower cost is going to be a huge win. And we have enterprise customers lined up for that because it's so critical for them, cost savings with data intensive workloads. And we're seeing quite a bit of adoption in the machine learning space. We also have very early conversations with AV makers, right? With one of the AV maker or autonomous vehicle maker that is exploring using Akash in their cars because the cars have like 6 GPUs, right? In the night when they're parking, they're not using them, so it's a great time to put the supply on Akash, right? So you have like use cases like that are so extreme that are very interesting to us that they're not possible on Web 2, right? Or like the cloud. So those are some of the enterprise use cases we're looking at. And this company, of course, they're interested in, first of all, using their own GPUs for their own workloads for their internal machine learning because they spend quite a bit of money on the cloud. And wants to see that profitable, they'll open it up hopefully to a general market. And we're also seeing quite a bit of like adoption with DR or disaster recovery. So deplatforming today is rampant. I mean, yesterday I saw Pomp got deplatformed from YouTube, right? I mean, Pomp is the face of Bitcoin. If you for lack, and someone like that stature getting deplatformed is not, it's only indication that deplatforming is going to be worst, right? So we are seeing deplatforming is also being weaponized by state actors, cancel culture, right? If a company doesn't agree with the country will use techniques that are, that are pretty known now to deplatform you, right? So deplatforming is being weaponized by state actors against corporate interests, against individuals that disagree with them, and we need a solution. So Akash Network is a perfect solution for deplatforming, right? So you can use Akash as a disaster recovery site. So in case you can run your primary site on Amazon or wherever you're running, in case you get deplatformed, you can switch over to Akash in an instant. Instantly without losing any of your customers, right? So we're seeing quite a bit of adoption there as well. And we're seeing a lot of adoption in the mining industry and proof of stake industry, and we're going into gaming as well. So there are a lot of verticals that are that we're gaining some adoption, and I think one of these verticals is going to take off. I have a good feeling on machine learning.
Yes, yeah, and gaming. Wow, I did not. Gaming, I think I've been so impressed with the speed at which I think gaming will really concrete the way DAOs, voting, the whole formulation of a DAO comes together. It's just so much easier to vote on stuff in the digital world than in the real world. I mean, like I live in a municipality where we have to we fix our own roads. And I know how big of a pain in the ass it is to try to get a few people to collaborate on a real physical world project. That the digital world, I think, will really expedite the process of that. And
yeah, Akash is perfect for DAOs. The reason being, so DAOs need a lot of computing services, right? Say you have a forum, where you discuss, you probably need to host that forum somewhere, or your website, for example. So today, a problem with DAOs is they got to elect a DAO member to represent them with Amazon, right? So this DAO member had to give the credit card or whatever to Amazon and give the identity as well, which is not ideal because this presents a key man risk. What happens if that member, something happens to the member, right? Akash supports multi-key, multi-sig, right? So you can actually have multiple people own a certain application, the hosting for it, and actually controlled by a DAO. So Akash is perfect for DAOs. There's no PII, personally identifiable information you need to give. There are no email addresses. There are no credit cards. You pay using crypto, and there's multi-sig. So it's great.
Awesome. So one of my well, the last few questions here. Can you tell us a little bit about the tokenomics and how the token is used? Is there a burning of the supply? What's the general tokenomics situation?
Yeah. So Akash is an inflationary deflationary token. So the primary purpose of the token is to secure the blockchain, right? So Akash is a independent proof of stake network. Each token gets one vote in the proof of stake consensus, and the token secures the blockchain. Without the token, there's no security, right? So and Akash Network is also, the AKT token is also the native token where users transact for compute to pay for compute using AKT, right? And and in order to secure the Akash Network, you need to stake. That means you need to lock up your tokens. And in exchange for you to lock up your tokens, you get staking rewards, right? So that's the incentive that encourages people to stake. And these staking rewards are on inflation, which is on a decay curve. Right now, the offer is about, I believe, the inflation at around 35 odd percent, where so that staking rewards come down to like around 50%, which is very, very attractive, right? But these staking rewards go down every block period for next 80 years. So they keep going down till zero. And somewhere in the middle, the staking rewards will be replaced by take income. That means up to 20%. This is a proposal, by the way, which will be implemented hopefully after a governance vote. We are proposing that up to 20% of the network revenue, the hosting revenue, go back to the stakers when the staking rewards become less meaningful, right, over time. So it's a fee sharing token. It doesn't have any burn mechanism. It's a earning token. Now, and of course, that take income doesn't make any sense in the early days. Right now, Akash doesn't generate as much as revenue that makes a meaningful share, a 20% share, but it's starting to, right? So we're growing on a very really good growth curve right now. So at some point, the take income will overtake the staking rewards. So of course, you have other additional passive income generating properties for Akash token. A big one being LPing, or liquidity mining, we call it. You can go right now onto Osmosis DEX and earn up to earn close to about 180% APR on Osmosis when you provide liquidity for Akash. And on other DEXs that are coming up, a big one being SIF Chain that recently announced Akash. I think you can get up to 500% APR there on SIF Chain as a secondary income generating property. And there's several other Cosmos ecosystem DEXs that are coming up, and all enabling Akash. So it's very, I mean, none of this is financial advice. Of course, this is, I mean, liquidity mining is risky. I mean, you have something called impermanent loss. I highly recommend you reading about it. But yes, the primary purpose is to secure the blockchain and pay for Akash token, pay for compute using Akash tokens, and the passive income generating properties are all incentives for you to secure the network. I think you muted.
Oh yes, sorry. I just was just looking around in the background here. I found over $250 billion annually in cloud compute service costs between SaaS, IaaS, and platform as a service. There's massive amounts of revenue. Is AWS is the majority of that, do you think?
Yes, AWS has about 30% market share, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
And who are the other big players in the centralized version of the space?
We call it the MAGA crowd, or the Microsoft, Alibaba, Google, and Amazon.
Okay, the mega crowd. That's an interesting one. Okay, and are there any other competitors in this space right now that are similar to Akash Network?
Similar, I would say in yes, there are some similarities with iExec. I would say iExec is another crypto-based decentralized cloud. They launched before Akash actually, so they are meant for they're a completely different model. So Akash supports long-running jobs, and in the sense like websites and whatnot, you can host an API server, website, or node, whatever you're running on Akash. On Amazon, you can run on Akash. Whereas iExec is a task based. You can only run tasks, background jobs, right? You can't run like websites on iExec. In iExec's model is also where the end user pays for running the job, whereas Akash's model is where the developer pays, right? Very similar to Amazon, right? So that's the closest that would come in terms of similarity to Akash. And I would say the other one would be Golem to a certain degree. Again, it's not very similar. Right. Golem and iExec are very similar, right? Golem is also task-based. They also do machine learning. A big difference between Akash and Golem is Golem, you have to rewrite your application in a language Golem created. So you can't run like generic websites or generic
but no
code.
WordPress. No WordPress.
No WordPress. You can't run WordPress, whatnot in Golem, right? For sure. So it has its own use cases. It's it's a different user base altogether, but those are the closest similarities to Akash.
Awesome. Well, so last thoughts here, Greg, because I know we got a hard stop soon. Is there anything you want to leave us with in thoughts that we haven't asked, or something that's kind of on your mind pressing? It could be from any, it could be about mushrooms for all I care. Anything that's super exciting to you lately? It could be.
Yeah, the most exciting thing is really building on Akash, right? Like we have about 500 live applications right now on Akash, and we have a very, very healthy grants program to build on Akash. So I would really encourage people, if you have an idea that you want to build on Akash, reach out to me or go to our forum.akash.network and apply for a grant. We'd love to fund you. We'd love to work with you to be successful. And we're also hiring a lot. So we have about 9 recs open. If you go to akash.network/careers, we're growing. We're about 20 people in the team. We'll love to be 40 people within the next 12 months. So our biggest need right now is head of marketing. So if you're someone that you think are a great marketer, we definitely come talk to us. And hopefully we can build a rocket ship.
Awesome. I will if you can, actually make sure you send me those links, and I'll post them down in the description below. Greg, it's been a pleasure to chat. It's just starting to rain and thunder here, and it's going to get more and more difficult for me to talk because the jungle rain, it gets real loud. So we're gonna jump out here. Thank you so much for sharing your time. I learned a lot today. I really appreciate it. I like what you guys are building. I think censorship is a huge problem in today's age. I won't go down that rabbit hole, but I'm a huge fan of research and the scientific conversation, and it has basically been snubbed in the last 2 years, and it is very scary to me. So I like to see these potentials of ways to change that and put the power back in the hands of the people who are delivering the data that's valuable for those who are looking to find it. So thank you for what you're building, and good shout on the people. Like if you're a programmer, developer, if you're head of good at marketing, give these guys a shout. I think finding any way to participate in this sector is a very smart thing to do. So I appreciate that, Greg. And I look forward to speaking again. We'll give you a shout in the future and see how you guys are doing again.
Thank you, Tio. Really appreciate it.
May as well. Thanks, Greg. We'll see you again soon.